guys, last week we talked about heifers. Today we're going to talk about a stampede. It sounds like we live in the wild, wild west. Hi everyone, welcome back to Jerusalem. We have an interesting story that has probably made your newsfeed, and I wanted to make sure that we addressed it from the Israeli perspective in case you're getting misinformation, which you probably are because the media tends to be biased against Israel. Now, as you know, I call my channel I Will Not Keep Silent from the Psalm, and that means clearly I have a bias in favor of Israel. And that bias is there for a few reasons. First of all, because of how I understand Israel in the context of God's Word. I have a few videos addressing the more theological side of the discussion of Israel, which I will link in the comments. One is called What John Piper Gets Wrong About Israel, which covers the land covenant. And then another one, Why I Care About Israel, which speaks to Ezekiel 36. So you can watch those and understand more scripturally how Israel fits in God's plan. But also factually, when I look at the evidence indicates that we should stand with Israel. And I've heard it said before that just because you have a bias doesn't mean you're wrong. So we stand with Israel here on this channel. And this story is one prime example of the media and Hamas also spinning it for their interest rather than telling the truth. On February 29th, we had a really tragic scenario. Aid trucks were entering into Gaza to deliver aid to the civilians, and it ended up resulting in a stampede that cost over 100 people their lives. Approximately 10 civilians were killed by fire from the IDF, and there's been a lot of confusion over what exactly happened. So we're going to look at that in a little bit more detail today. According to the IDF, about 4:40 in the morning, 38 delivery trucks carrying humanitarian aid entered into Gaza. The trucks were overrun and looted by civilians, and this resulted in a high number of fatalities as the civilians were trampled in the stampede and even hit by the delivery trucks. Now, the trucks were being driven by Gaza civilians who are independent contractors. So there were no Israelis and no IDF soldiers driving these trucks. This was something that happened internally within the Gazan population. Soon after the event occurred, an Israeli spokesman, Avi Hyman, released the following statement. At some point, the trucks were overwhelmed and the people driving the trucks, which were Gazan civilian drivers, plowed into the crowds of people, ultimately killing, as my understanding is, tens of people. I don't have anything more specific to that. It is unfolding. Now we know that the exact number, as released from the Hamas-run Ministry of Health, was 104. And of course, the numbers that we receive from the Ministry of Health in Gaza, of course, it is run by Hamas, and those numbers are not verified by any independent third party. So, also it's important to note that during the stampede, the IDF did not shoot towards the convoy. The Israeli investigation indicates that the shooting incident occurred at a location on the border where the IDF forces were securing the convoy. The IDF was guarding the trucks so that Hamas could not interfere with the delivery of the aid to the civilians, and at that point they were approached by a group of civilians, so they fired into the air to cause them to scatter, and the ones that continued to run towards them they perceived as a threat, and they fired on those individuals. And for the sake of the IDF, I do think we really have to consider that Hamas really truly does dress as civilians, and just the difficult position that puts our soldiers in, especially at a time when they're feeling threatened. So of course Hamas is blaming the 104 deaths on the IDF, claiming they were Israeli deaths, and this is one of those moments where the investigation and the aerial footage from the IDF clearly shows that it was a stampede that caused the deaths, and it was being run over by the Gaza civilian-driven delivery trucks that contributed as well. This was nothing related to the IDF, yet this number, this 104, will be grouped in with the totals that the Hamas-run Ministry of Health provides to the media. If you remember when the fake hospital bombing story happened back in October, they attributed the loss of 500 to that, which proved to be completely untrue. It was a Palestinian Islamic Jihad rocket, and less than 40 people were killed in that incident. But even so, they didn't subtract that 500 from the total when the numbers were released to the press. We should seriously be skeptical of all numbers that Hamas releases, but even just taking them at face value, our civilian to combatant fatality ratio remains very low. It's anywhere between 1.5 and 2, depending on which day and which numbers you're looking at. The UN's average for urban warfare is 9-1, and other historic wars have resulted in averages that were closer to 4-1 or 3.5-1. So Israel's ratio remains extremely low, and that's something that those of us who stand with Israel need to continue to remind people, because civilian fatalities is the main argument that the pro-Palestinian camp uses against Israel's right to self-defense. And I have a previous video on civilian to combatant fatality ratios that you can view to understand how the math works for that. Now, the Stampede is also resulting in a few other problems that we're facing. One of those being that since the situation got so out of control, the EU, who had previously removed funding from UNRWA, has decided to reinstate that funding so they can help facilitate the delivery of aid. Now, we don't need UNRWA. The UN has another organization, UNHCR, the UN High Council for Refugees, that handles all of the other refugees in the world. The Palestinian people are the only people group that have their own organization and their own set of international laws. They are treated completely differently from an international law perspective than any other people group in the entire world. So we can get rid of UNRWA and we can use the UNHCR and other aid organizations to help facilitate the delivery of aid. And these organizations, I'm just going to throw my opinion out there, they should not be hiring Arabs in Gaza. They should be an international community who has a commitment to ensuring that terrorists will not be involved in this process. I'm still not confident in any case. Okay, and then the other problem that this brings up is that Hamas, since they are reporting the lie that Israel was responsible for the 104 deaths associated with this incident, are now using it to hold hostage any hostage release plans. So it's creating some problems for us on a few different levels, which is really sad because, of course, Israel isn't responsible for this. So this one really tragic incident is creating some problems and probably also going to change the direction of the international community and the way that it is handling the aid organizations in Gaza. Okay, so I really think that this Stampede is going to be one of the historical markers of the direction that this war takes. So I wanted to make sure to talk about it here. I'm not breaking news, so I can't keep up with that pace, guys. I'm more apologetics, history, theology, all Israel focused, centered. We're going to talk about holy days, biblical sites, you know, these things here. I do want to keep you all updated on the news, but I don't do breaking news. Because I think this one is pretty significant, I wanted to make sure to have record of it here. And I think it's something that we might need to be revisiting in the future, especially as it relates to the UN. So I just wanted to make sure that it was here for record and that I had spoken to it as an Israeli here on the ground. Not that I have insider military information, but you know, I'm here living it in real time. So I wanted to share about it with you all. And I just also want to say too, though, that guys, I am solidly pro-Israel. That will never change. There's no argument. I've lived here long enough that there's no argument anyone could give me to change my mind on this. But even so, when situations like this happen, I really grieve it. I'm really sorry that the people were hungry enough that this stampede took place and that the drivers of the trucks felt threatened enough that they just had to plow through. But I think it's also important to remember that none of our Arab neighbors are offering to open their borders to receive them as refugees right now, and That's really where the international community should be pushing rather than blaming Israel for what happened. Okay, so I think that's all I have on this topic. I will include a few articles for you all to visit in the show notes, and you can let me know if you have any questions on it. So if more information comes out, I will make sure to update everyone here the best that I can. And also, I would like some prayer because I still have this cast. I fell on a slippery, wet surface, and it could have been a lot worse, we'll say. I hit my head, I twisted my knee. It could have been much worse. I have a fracture in my hand and a sprained wrist. So let's just add a broken bone to a war, right? With no grandparents around to help. Okay. Well, again, as I always say, I'm so grateful for all of you, the way that you're standing with Israel and supporting us, supporting our nation, supporting me and my family for Zion's sake. I won't be silent, and I hope you won't either. All right, see you guys next time.